Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I'm sitting here in my living room doing this filming, and I tell you, we have needed rain for so long. Amazingly, a lot of our ponds have still been, fairly full, amazingly full, to be honest about it. But yards have been, turning brown and all this kind of stuff. We really, really, really needed rain until now. I'm telling you, it has been coming a gully washer. You know, it's really amazing how much rain we have gotten this morning. So it's an incredible blessing. Of course, that means the yard's going to grow and have to be mowed. I have a tendency not to like yard work. Okay, I really don't. So, anyway, thank you again for joining me here on Morning Musings. I do very, very much appreciate you being with me. Well, I've spent a couple of videos now discussing the unseen nature of the kingdom, being able to walk by faith and not by sight. Now, I really, really, really have to drive this point home before moving on to what I want to get to today. Repeatedly, we hear people say, well, if you're saying all prophecy is fulfilled and we're in the new heaven and new earth, just look around. It's the same old heaven, same old earth. And by the way, sin, horrible things, injustice, they're still everywhere. So if this is your concept of the kingdom, I don't want anything to do with it. Well, I don't mean to be unkind, but if you say you don't want anything to do with God's kingdom, then you don't have anything to do with God's kingdom. It's that simple. It's your choice. So if you tell us that you don't want anything to do with God's kingdom, God allows you to make that choice, but it's not a wise decision. Now then, one more point on this. I've touched on it. Why did Jesus reject the offer of a nationalistic, militaristic, national restoration of Israel? Because he knew, as I spent one video talking about, he knew that the desire for an earthly kingdom or king on a physical throne in the physical city of Jerusalem over the physical land was from its very beginning a violation of the will of God. All you have to do is go to 1 Samuel chapter 8, 1 Samuel chapter 12, 1 Samuel chapter 10, 1 Samuel chapter 12. Three times God said it was a violation. Samuel said it was a violation. The children of Israel finally kind of got the message and said it was a violation and a great sin. But they just persisted. Now, over the last little bit, as I've posted and as I've filmed the importance of seeing, we do not judge the reality of God's kingdom by everything that we see with our physical eyes. And I've been told on my YouTube videos, well, preterism is just a joke and all you can do is spiritualize. No, we're not the ones that spiritualized. It is Jesus himself that rejected the earthly kingdom. It is Jesus himself who castigated the Jews. And he said, I am from above, you are from beneath. And when they wanted that physical kingdom, the kingdom of earth, he rejected it. And yet these individuals that post here on my YouTube video, and with whom I've, down through the years, I've had multiple formal public debates with individuals who say they're looking for that very kind of kingdom. When you point out that their hermeneutic is the very hermeneutic that the Jews used to reject Jesus, their hermeneutic is the very hermeneutic by which they defined the kingdom, which Jesus rejected, then all of a sudden folks turn kind of vicious. There's no other way to put it. They cast aspersions, they cast insults, they start calling names. And those of us who are accepting the biblical facts, all of a sudden we are the false teachers. Isn't that ironic? Absolutely ironic. So we have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that the modern day teaching of a yet future, physically oriented, earthly kingdom with Jesus on a physical throne in the physical city of Jerusalem is the very expression of the Jewish hermeneutic, the Jewish eschatology, the Jewish hope that put Jesus on the cross. And I'm not trying to be unkind, because I know that no one would willingly, knowingly, understandingly, is that a word? Take a position consciously thinking, oh, I'm going to take the same position and I'm going to preach the same doctrine that put Jesus on the cross. I understand nobody would consciously take that. But when you teach a doctrine, when you accept a doctrine that for all practical purposes is identical to the eschatology, to the kingdom hope, to the kingdom doctrine of the Jews, the very doctrine that put Jesus on the cross, then you're shaking hands with the Jews who put him on the cross. And again, I mean no disrespect. I know that good, honest, sincere people believe in that kind of a kingdom without ever thinking about the consequences, without ever thinking about the implications. I correspond with people like that virtually every single day. I just simply ask, I beg that you consider to compare the futuristic doctrines of those looking for an earthly physical kingdom with the first century Jewish doctrine of an earthly physical kingdom. If you can find any radical differences, please contact me. Let me know what those differences are. I'll be happy to look at them. Now then, okay, here we are on Thursday, and we're back in Revelation chapter 11 and doing that comparison with Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. Now, I've touched on, in the past, the connections between Daniel chapter 12, Matthew 25, 31 and following, and Revelation chapter 11. In the few moments left to me this morning, and I thought about just leaving it like this and just making it really super brief here for this Thursday and just kind of moving on, but I just got to do this, okay? Daniel chapter 12. Number one, time of the resurrection, the time of the judgment of the living and the dead, the time of the judgment of the just and the unjust. It's the time of the kingdom when the righteous would shine forth in the kingdom. It's the time of the end. Daniel is about the appointed time of the end of the age, okay? And it's the time when the prophets, like Daniel chapter 12, verse 13, Daniel, go your way until the time of the end, and you will arise to your inheritance. So, Daniel chapter 12, what do we have? We have basically every constituent element of the Olivet Discourse. We have the Great Tribulation, Daniel 12:1, Matthew 24:21. We have resurrection. We have the time of the end. We have the time of the kingdom. We have the time of the judgment of the living and the dead, meaning it's the time of the rewarding of the prophets. Okay, so what's Matthew 25? Matthew chapter 25, it's the coming of the Son of Man. Well, when is the coming of the Son of Man? Oh, it's the end of the age. Matthew chapter 25, I don't know of anybody that denies this. Matthew chapter 25, time of the resurrection. Matthew chapter 25, the judgment of the just and of the unjust. Matthew chapter 25, the time of the kingdom. Everybody with me here? Now then, Revelation chapter 11. In the sounding of the seventh trumpet, what do we have? The time of the resurrection, the time of the judgment of the living and the dead. Nobody has a problem with the time of the judgment of the living and the dead being the resurrection, right? If you have a problem with that, raise your hand. Send me a note, okay? If you don't believe the time of the judgment of the living and the dead is the time of the resurrection, go ahead and send me an email with your justification, with your scriptural reasons for rejecting that. So anyway, Revelation chapter 11, sounding the seventh trumpet, the time of the resurrection. The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ, which is Christ sitting at the throne of his glory, and all the nations gathered before him to give an account to Jesus. This is Christ judging the nations. Pretty obviously the end of the age, right? And for the righteous, enter thou into the joys of the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. This is time of the rewarding of the dead. This is Revelation chapter 11. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come, and you have taken your great power, and you have reigned. Now, like I've pointed out before, this doesn't mean that he wouldn't reign before then. After all, it's talking about the Father. Are we going to say that the Father had never reigned before this time? No, he's just going to exercise his sovereignty at this time. There's a difference between entering into the kingdom and coming in the kingdom. Huge difference. Okay. What else is in Revelation chapter 11? The time of the dead that they should be judged, and the time to reward your servants, the prophets, and the saints. Now, listen to me. I challenge anyone to find any dichotomy, any temporal distinction, any difference between Daniel 12, Matthew 25, 31 and following, and Revelation chapter 11, 15 to 19. I challenge anyone to do that. When you can't do that, what do we find? We find Daniel chapter 12 telling us that the Great Tribulation, the resurrection, the appointed time of the end of the age, the kingdom, the rewarding of the prophets, and of course, the Great Tribulation. All of those things would be fulfilled, quote, when the power of the holy people is completely shattered, unquote. Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. So, Daniel chapter 12, every constituent element found in Revelation chapter 11, but Revelation 11 is Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. Daniel chapter 12 would be fulfilled when the power of the holy people was completely shattered. That was in AD 70. That means Revelation chapter 11 was fulfilled in AD 70. But if Revelation chapter 11 was fulfilled in AD 70, that means Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following was fulfilled in AD 70. That means the Olivet Discourse cannot be divided. It's not about two different subjects. It is one singular narrative about the end of the age events, inclusive of the Great Tribulation, the resurrection, the judgment of the living and the dead, the time of the rewarding of the prophets. I mean, how many times are the prophets going to get rewarded? You got them rewarded in Revelation chapter 11. You got them rewarded over here in chapter 20. Which means, by the way, Revelation chapter 11, 15 and following is about the time of the end of the millennium at the judgment of Jerusalem. It's not the beginning of the millennium, ladies and gentlemen. It's the end of it. Okay, I'm out of time. I hope you can see all of these connections. And the parallels are perfect, ladies and gentlemen. And look, in my book, The Resurrection of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future, I discuss an awful lot of these things and more too, because it's about that thick. And in my May 2022 U.S. Orders Only 2-book special, Watching for the Parousia, where Jesus' apostles confused, and Paul on trial, Paul, the Pharisees, and the resurrection, I discuss all of these issues. And I examine Daniel 12, Matthew 25, Revelation chapter 11. Take advantage of the special, okay? And throw in a copy of Daniel chapter 12. You'd be really, really glad you did. Okay, I'm out of time. So tomorrow, we will continue our examination on why N.T. Wright is wrong on the redemption of creation. I'll see you on the flip side.